On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, I continue my expedition to scale the mountain of mailbag questions you sickos sent in about the NBA draft.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, June the 12th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of the podcast. It's free to join. And it's a great little family we got building around the show, talking draft, talking trades, talking finals, and how much we wish it were over because we're sick of watching the damn Celtics succeed. Great place to come be and to hang out. We're going to do a live voice hangout on draft night. That should be tons of fun as well. So come hang out. Locked On Raptors Discord is free to join as always. Link in the description. Okay, of course, you can find the show for free. Get your podcast, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, all that good stuff on the audio side of things. It's much appreciated when you support us over there. You can also find us on YouTube. Go subscribe to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell button, and you will get a push notification every single time the show is about to premiere or go live. It's much appreciated. All right, on today's show, continuing to rattle through a whole bucket full of mailbag questions you guys sent me in over the course of the last couple of days. And, I got through 12 yesterday. We're going to get through 12 again today. No time to lose. Let's get rolling. We've got questions on, picks 19 and 31. Would the Raptors trade those picks? Is that crazy talk to think about that in this draft? Kind of think it is. We'll get into that. We'll talk a lot about guards. Lots of questions about guards. Lots of draft-related stuff to dig into. Let's begin with our question number one from Zakeem 10 asking thoughts on Isaiah Collier as a potential fit with the Raptors. So I have weird feelings about Isaiah Collier. I think it's really fair to suggest that the context he played in at USC this past season was not super conducive to his success. That was a weird team. They had the Bronny James medical incident early on in the year that kind of threw off their whole situation. And Isaiah Collier was playing kind of in a lack of space. And I don't think maybe got the greatest opportunity to show off all that he's potentially capable of. He's a really good athlete. He's big for a guard. Like, he checks a lot of boxes you'd look for. But to me, the lack of three-point shooting, or sort of the questions about the three-point shot ever coming along to a pretty serious level, like, maybe he's someone who can knock him down, cursory-wise, wide open catch and shoot, stuff like that. But is he going to have pull-up juice? That feels maybe like a bit of a far-fetched thing. Is he going to be someone who's high volume that maybe doesn't feel like it's super within his wheelhouse? And I think the decision-making as well with him is not incredible either. And so while I don't love the package that Isaiah Collier brings, it's tough. It's hard to look at a 6'4" athletic guard and say, no, not for me, especially if he falls to number 19, which it seems like there's a real chance that could happen. If you look at the sort of top part of the draft, and this was pointed out yesterday, I was listening into a truly unhinged, psychotic mock draft special over at Udo Ball. Very good podcast. You go check it out. But they were kind of remarking upon all the teams in the top part of the draft just like don't need guards. And the guards, Devin Carter, Isaiah Collier, Rob Dillingham even could slide. And the Raptors could be waiting there at 19. And one of those guys could fall to them. And we know one of the things the Raptors want to address this summer is backup guard play. I have prioritized wings and bigs for the Raptors in sort of thinking about who they'll take at 19 and 31. But if Collier's there, you got to think about it for sure. I'd still probably prefer to go more of a winger big way. Like, I think there's no way, Isaiah Collier falling to 19 would have him jump over, say, Deron Holmes on my own personal board, who I think is like going to be number one. I really want the Raptors to take Deron Holmes. Not sure he's going to be there. I'm very sad thinking about him not being there. But look, if the value of the draft kind of works that Isaiah Collier's there at 19 and some of the higher guys in your own board weren't there at 19, you could do worse than taking a guy who about a year ago was projected to kind of be in the top 5, if not go number 1 in this draft at various points in the lead up to this draft. It's a worthwhile bet to take at 19. I think that's just like a really nice value for a talented player who's got a lot of explosiveness and some stuff to work with. A lot of stuff to iron out too, but you give him some time. He doesn't have to have all of the burden of being a lead guard on his plate right away with Emmanuel quickly taking up that mantle. I could see it. I'm not thrilled with Collier as a prospect, but if he's there at 19 and your favorites are not there, or my favorites, or whomever's favorites, the Raptors' favorites, I guess, aren't there, you could do a lot worse than taking Collier there. So I hope I answered the question. This next one comes in from Bryden asking, outside of Topic injury, who do you think is most likely to fall, and how far would they fall in the draft? It's tough. Like, I don't have sources. I'm not someone who is keeping track of who's performing super well in workouts and stuff like that. The risers and fallers and whatnot. That's all kind of beyond my purview. But I do think the guards are an area to look at, right? There's a lot of guards in this draft in the top sort of reaches. Devin Carter, Rob Dillingham, I mentioned them. Jared McCain's there too. Maybe you classify Jacoby Walter as more of a two guard than a wing. He probably slots in at the 2 or 3 somewhere in the NBA. You got Collier. There's lots of guys there who could slide, and like not all these teams are in need of guards. Like the Hawks have Trae Young and or DeJounte Murray till further notice, and they'll probably keep at least one of those guys. The Wizards, they could be a guard team, but I think they're drafting too high to maybe swing on one of these guards. Maybe they trade back. Reed Shepherd's in there too. I think he's probably going to end up going pretty high, but you got the Rockets. They have Fred VanVleet for at least a little bit, maybe just one more year. Maybe they're not too worried about guard. Maybe they're looking to add the guard of the future. But beyond that, the Spurs could take one, but the Pistons, not really. The Hornets, they seem loaded with guards, so they have LaMelo Ball at least. The Blazers, it's just like, oops, all guards is their team. And then the Grizzlies, like, they're loaded with guards too. They need bigs. Like, they need guys to, play next to Jaren Jackson Jr. in that front court going forward. A lot of teams in here that could just kind of pass on the guards, and it could leave a whole bunch of them there for the Raptors to potentially sort through at 19. So I would say that's most likely. Obviously, Topic just falls into that as well as someone who's had the injury stuff. So that's kind of my read on it. Ron Holland has been reported as sliding and is working out with teams in the teens as well. So maybe he slips too. There's going to be someone who falls, I think, because this draft is weird and there's no sort of consensus. And I think different teams have different feelings on guys. And if the fit's not right at a certain pick, then they'll probably just pass on a guy, even if he has a little bit more pre-draft pedigree. It's going to be wild to watch. There will be someone who slides. Who that is and whether the Raptors would want to take him at 19 remains to be seen. Next question here comes from JLo6701, sticking on the guard train here. I want a real backup point guard. This is a position that seems to have been an issue for years. Let's say 31. Who would you target? I'm assuming the Raptors are taking a wing or big man at 19. I agree with that. I think at 31, look, if Bub Carrington's there at 31, which he maybe won't be, maybe it seems like he's going to go a little bit higher. Could do a lot worse than Bub Carrington. Talked a lot about him on yesterday's show. He's a fun guy. I have mentioned a couple weeks ago or last week, whenever it was, Tyler Kolek, pretty interesting to me as well, as just like a guy who's probably going to be a long time solid backup player. Maybe he doesn't even get drafted. Like, there's a whole group of guys who could get drafted in the late first or just not get drafted at all. I think Kolek falls in there, although he feels like he's probably a little bit more geared towards the back end of the first round with maybe a more contending type team that wants to go and get some long-term stability at backup guard. If he's there at 31 and the Raptors have taken their wing or big and the rest of their higher priority guys are off the board, certainly think a Tyler Kolek could be interesting. I just think he's going to be a long time, very solid backup, which there are worse things to have on your team and to select with the 31st pick. Think Andrew Nembhard went 31st or 32nd to the Pacers in the year where the Raptors drafted Christian Koloko a couple spots after. You can get adults who play guard late in the draft because they're not usually the guys who are going to be tabbed as like the high upside, got to swing on them guys. So maybe someone like Kolek falls there. Maybe Bub Carrington falls. Those are the kind of two guys I think who are most likely to be there at 31 of the guard class we've talked about. We'll come back on the other side. We got more questions about 19 and 31. Ryan Dunn, is he someone the Raptors should look at? I've been pretty reticent to go that way, but there's some interesting stuff with a guy who is that good defensively. We'll talk about him and a lot more as we continue to sort through your mailbag questions coming up in just one sec. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Look, we all got stressors that we want to get off of our chest, big or small. Maybe you've gone through some major trauma. Maybe you're just dealing with the daily things life throws at us all. And boy, oh boy, does life love to throw stuff at you. being able to talk about it with someone is a wonderful thing. Not talking about it can really affect you. It can build up. It can become a negative force in your life. So having a therapist that you can just vent to, they can take what you say, help you process it, help you make decisions in your life that are in line with your values and your goals and the things that you want to do. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and BetterHelp can provide that for you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedInNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Back at it here on your mailbag edition, part 2 of going through a couple dozen questions about the NBA draft that you little sickos sent over. Thank you, sickos, for providing the fresh content in the middle of a couple of weeks before the draft where things are light. We'll obviously have plenty more draft stuff to come. We've got a fun episode coming up on Friday I want to promote, by the way. Zulfi Sheikh, our pal from Raptors Republic, is going to be on. We're going to do some fake trades and kind of grade them. Are they good or bad? And of course, with me on the podcast, they're always going to be good because I'm really good at fake trades. Let's go. Let's continue on. Next one here. Mid-range assassin asking, how would you feel about Ryan Dunn at 19/31? And also, do you think his offensive game can come along? Finally, is a good comp Shawn Marion? Start with the last question. No, I don't think Ryan Dunn's good comp is a literal Hall of Famer. It's just Shawn Marion brought a lot to the table offensively, even if his jump shot was bizarro. And I don't know if Ryan Dunn has that kind of offensive ceiling. Maybe like Toronto Raptors Shawn Marion. Sure, why not? Although I don't remember him playing a whole lot of defense during that brief stint, the beautiful brief stint where Shawn Marion was a Raptor, which, remember, Shawn Marion was a Raptor. People forget that. When it comes to Ryan Dunn, at 19, I think it's a no-go. I just think there are going to be better wing prospects with less glaring, slap-you-in-the-face questions about their long-term viability in the NBA than Ryan Dunn. You got Keyshawn George is going to be there. And I know Keyshawn George has his detractors who think he's not athletic enough or whatever. You're 6'8", you can pass and you can shoot. And I think he's like strong enough to be a solid defender at the very least in the NBA. I kind of think the detractors of his defense missed the point on him a little bit. Again, I could be wrong too. I'm wrong about this stuff all the time, but I really like Keyshawn George. I would totally put him ahead of Ryan Dunn at 31. I would put, kind of all the adults, right? Tristan Da Silva, Jacoby Walter. I'd put those guys ahead of Ryan Dunn. I'd put, frankly, Jalen Tyson ahead of Ryan Dunn. I just, the offensive questions are real. And if this team didn't already have Scotty Barnes as like a core tenet player for them, whose shooting is, I think, a little bit suspect, but who I think even beyond like Scotty's own shooting, I think it's pretty clear that you put shooting with Scotty Barnes, good things are going to happen. He's always had success playing with Gary Trent Jr. I think we saw really nice, interesting flashes of a two-man game with Grady Dick last season. And I fully believe that eventually they'll iron out the chemistry between Barnes and Emmanuel quickly. Putting shooting around Scotty and his passing and the ability for him to draw double teams, it's just kind of a basic, simple basketball thing. It's going to work. And Ryan Dunn just does not shoot. 20% from three, 53% of the line. There are no good indicators there. He's got all kinds of little, I can cut and kind of, finish plays on the baseline and stuff like that. Like, that's great. Raptors got a lot of guys like that. And I just, as much as the defensive upside is interesting, I think long-term, if you're thinking about Ryan Dunn playing in lineups with RJ Barrett, who's a suspect shooter, or at least a shooter teams don't care about, even if he's knocking them down, I think teams are going to be happy to have RJ Barrett take threes until further notice. If you're playing him with Scotty Barnes, who probably nets out as like an average at best, mostly catch and shoot guy, who again, defenses are going to be okay taking threes over doing other Scotty Barnes things, and Jakob Poeltl, who is just not a three-point threat at all, like that's a lot of cramped space. That's just like a bad bit of floor geometry. I don't know if there's like a long-term way to have Ryan Dunn be viable next to Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett in particular. And so I'm looking elsewhere, guys who have a little bit more shooting upside, guys who have better indicators from the shooting perspective, whether from the big man spot or among the wings. And I just think at 19, there are going to be too many guys who fit the bill for the Raptors for them to go and really take that swing on Ryan Dunn. At 31, you could probably talk me into it a little bit more and, do the whole, hey, if we teach the guy to shoot thing, he's going to be great. Like, yeah, you can do that. It's not often you actually teach the guy to shoot. It's sometimes it happens, and a lot of the times it's like totally unpredictable and comes out of left field when guys go from total non-shooters to good shooters. But Ryan Dunn is such a total non-shooter that the jump from where he is to being like a reasonable volume, average NBA three-point shooter, that would be like an unprecedented jump, like an outlier among outliers. And I just don't know if you can bank on that, even at 31. When I think there are going to be guys there who fit the bill a little bit more. Bobby Clintman, for example, big, long wing type. He's currently projected to go to the Raptors on Tankathon. I think there's a little bit more shooting upside to tap into there. And I think I would just go that route over Ryan Dunn, even if Ryan Dunn very well could be on a per minute basis one of the best defenders in basketball. What do those guys really get you? Look at Matisse Thybulle, right? Easily one of the best defenders in basketball. Got a stolen valor all defense team that OG Anunoby should have made way back in the day. Like, he's an incredible defensive player, but he doesn't play high leverage minutes for good teams because he cannot stay on the floor offensively. We even saw this with like one of the great one-way players we've ever seen, Tony Allen. His career basically ended when the Golden State Warriors were like, we'll just force him to shoot and put Andrew Bogut on him. And it completely ruined the Grizzlies' chances of taking down the Golden State Warriors back in the 2015 playoffs. That little switch was like kind of the thing that set the Warriors up to go win that championship after the Grizzlies took a 2-1 series lead in the second round. I love Tony Allen, but his lack of shooting ended up being his demise as the league skewed more towards three-point shooting and just having space everywhere. And I just don't think Ryan Dunn is going to be able to do that. Long answer here, but I would prefer they go somewhere else, even if the three-point or even if the defense for Ryan Dunn is off the charts good. It can only be so good if you're only playing 18 minutes a game because you can't be out there because your offense is so unusable. And look, guys get better, right? Like, this could totally, like, this is the draft. All the caveats apply of what guys are now is not what they always will be, but we can only go on the information we have right now. And right now, I think Ryan Dunn's so far away in offense that would be pretty close to a do-not draft for me from the Raptors. And it could be different for another team, right? If you're loaded with shooting, it's a different story. He might be a perfect fit. Small ball 5 stuff, things like that. I just think with the Raptors and how they're built, with Scotty Barnes being a particular type of guy to fit around, I don't think Ryan Dunn's the fit. Next question here is from RJ Island asking, why do I find Ryan Dunn the most generic, boring prospect in the history of drafts? He's the default setting when you open 2K, 2K's create a player. I feel like this is a little harsh. I think his defense is incredible and it's cool to watch and all that stuff. He does really fun things out there. I am personally, if I'm going to sort of listen to the question here and kind of vibe with it, I think I understand the notion of like really good defender who can't shoot being kind of a played out trope among the draft at this point. And like a lot of the times those guys just don't work out. And I'm sort of, every time one of these types of dudes comes along where it's like incredible defense, the shot's way off, I just find myself like, okay, like we kind of know what the story is likely to be here. Not to say that it's guaranteed to be one thing or another, but I get why it feels like a bit of an overdone draft storyline of these types of guys. Next question here comes from our pal Freddie Rivas, new dad, lovely man, a wonderful comedian, host of the Pickup WNBA podcast with Catherine Niker. You should go check it out. Freddie asks, is there a basketball revolution going on in France, and should the Raptors draft a French player? Look, I don't think it's ever a good idea to just be like, we're going to draft a specific player from a specific country. Zach Edey. I think, you got to see where the board's at and see who's there. I don't think just because France is having a moment when it comes to their players that you got to go jump on it. Maybe you do, right? There are certainly plenty of options in this draft. I think most of the options will be gone by the time the Raptors pick at 19. Tidjane Salane's going to be gone. You would think that Alexander Sarr and Zachary Risache are going to be gone as well. And so you're probably looking at Pacome Dadier. And I am going to dive into Dadier a little bit more, I think, next week when I kind of do some more prospect breakdowns and get back to that in the week before the draft. Dadier is a really interesting guy. Seems to be rising up boards, going as high I've seen as like the late teens in some cases. I think I've seen him mock to the Raptors in a place or two. But anywhere between 20 and 35, he seems to be going at this point. 6'8" wing, playing in Germany right now. A lot of really interesting stuff going on there with him, with like shot creation and stuff. maybe that's the guy. I don't think just because the country's having a moment with a certain run of good players that you got to go hop on the wagon or anything like that. But, if there's a good French player there for the Raptors at 19 or 31 and he's their guy, then take your guy and hope you ride the wave of French hoops becoming our overlords for the rest of time. Thanks, Wemby. Next one here. Muggsy asks, what are the odds of the Raptors package 19 and 31 to move up higher in the draft or to gain future draft capital in a stronger draft? Would be pretty stunned if they moved up to get more a higher pick in this draft. I just think to package 2 picks into one with this draft kind of misses the entire point of what this draft is, which is it's a volume and quantity of guys over quality of guys draft, and having the most shots possible in this range of the draft between 19 and 31, which I think is a good place to be. Talked about that a couple weeks ago as well with Maxwell Baumbach and how it is a pretty favorable spot. It doesn't make sense to turn those 2 shots into one to move up 5 to 10 spots in the draft order and take a guy who has just as many questions as who you might be able to take at 19 or 31. Different draft where there's like a clear talent cutoff after 10 or something, sure. But I don't think that's the case here. I think it's pretty flat. There's just like a lot of very interesting players between 10 and 40 of this draft. I'd rather have 2 shots in that range than 3, even if one of those shots could be a little bit higher. Sorry, two shots than 1. That's what I meant. We'll come back on the other side, get into a little bit more on picks 19 and 31. And, what if they do trade them? What kind of players could they get back in exchange for those picks? That's a big mystery box. We'll get into that coming up in just 1 second as we close up the show. We're going to have to rattle through like a whole bunch of questions in 10 minutes. We're going to do it, though, I promise. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in all of North America. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, and more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP, Drew Holiday, baby, to who's going to hit one out of the park and all of that good stuff in between. Great time right now, obviously. Championship season on the NHL side of things and in the NBA. And maybe you want to go and do a little 2-game parlay of, the Dallas Mavericks getting back in the series against the Celtics tonight. Maybe no Kristaps Porzingis, Luka Doncic going off back at home, role players playing better. Maybe you want to go and ride the Mavericks wave. And maybe you think the Edmonton Oilers going back home are going to pick up a Game 3 win as well. Put some scratch down on both of those events. And if both those teams win, you'll get some money out of it. That's a pretty cool thing to go and do. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, back at it here. We got 6 more questions on the docket. We'll rattle through them all because I am a good host who lives up to his promises sometimes. Just sort of before we get into the last run of questions here, a reminder, Locked On Sports Today 24/7 is your all-day streaming channel over on YouTube. You can go check out Locked On shows from all of the local shows covering the biggest stories in sports, the national shows covering those stories as well on a continuous loop 24 hours a day. You got Locked On Panthers and Oilers covering the Cup final. You've got Mavericks and Celtics, of course, running all day over there covering the NBA Finals. It's a great time for sports. Great time to go check out Locked On Sports Today 24/7 if you haven't yet. All right, picking up the thread of picks 19 and 31. Would they trade those picks? This one comes from Commander Beef. Best handle in the Discord, I think. Very good stuff. I'm from the future. The Raptors package pick 19 and 31 to move up to draft someone. Who do you think it is? I really hope it's not Zach Edey. There's all kinds of reporting the Raptors are interested in Zach Edey. It's smokescreen season and all of that. I talked about it a couple days ago on the show. I like Zach Edey as a prospect in a vacuum. I think the fit on the Raptors is just not there. It's not what the Raptors need right now. I hope it's not. Again, it's hard to think here because I don't know if there's like a super Masai Ujiri player. Oh, that's wrong. It's Tidjane Salaün, 6'9" wing out of France. He probably feels like the guy that if like Masai is going to go sicko, I need my next Bruno mode, Tidjane Salaun's probably the guy to trade up for it. Or when he tried to trade up for Giannis back in the day, not to say any of these guys are going to be Giannis, although Giannis did come from a historically not so good draft. So maybe there's hope for one of these guys really popping. Salaün feels like the most classic Raptors-y guy that the Raptors would trade up 19 and 31 to go and try and draft. Beyond that, I don't quite see it unless they're really trying to. Maybe they just really covet Zach Edey. We'll always have to live in a world where they covet Zach Edey and he's on the Raptors. And hey, if that happens, it'll be very, very easy to root for Zach Edey. I think for basketball reasons, it's not the best fit. But if it's not Edey, I think it's Salon. And I hope they don't trade up. I think it would be a bad idea. Next one here from Freddie Rivas asking, if the Raptors keep 19 and 31, will the team be too young? Look, people may be surprised to hear this. You listen to this podcast, I hate the youths. I only like adults who play basketball, who know what they're doing, who are older than 25 years old, can rent a car in every province or whatever. I don't think the team would be too young, though. I think there's a nice blend of vets and guys who've been around a little bit. I mean, hell, RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley are going to be in year 5 next season. They're not exactly new to this whole thing. They've been to the playoffs before. They've seen it. Scotty Barnes has been to the playoffs before. It was once and it was fleeting, but it was cool. And obviously you've got Jakob Poeltl, who's been around the block. Kelly Olynyk's been around forever. We'll see what happens with Bruce Brown and Gary Trent Jr., but both of those guys are steady vets. Chris Boucher's around probably, unless they offload him this summer. I don't think they'll be too young. And actually, I think, for me, another big reason why I think they should just use both of these picks. And if not just use both of these picks, trade back to get an extra pick using the model I threw out yesterday, sort of citing Sam Vecini's recent mock draft, where they tried to trade every pick in the draft over on the Game Theory podcast. Sam pointed out the idea of the Raptors trading 19 and 31 to the Knicks for 24, 25, and 38. And if that's the case, I could get on board with that, because I just think more shots in this range of the draft is good. And I do think this is a pretty essential draft for the Raptors trying to do the thing they did last decade, which was build a shadow core that either grew into core pieces of the team or became guys that they could then trade for the upgrades that this team is still going to need talent-wise. Look, maybe they just go and tank. It would suck. I hope they don't do it, because tanking is for losers. But that's, if they don't go that route, then a trade is going to be the way. They probably have to go and find your number 2 to Scotty if Emmanuel Quickley can't be that. And I still hold out hope that Emmanuel Quickley can be that. I know I'm in the top 5% of Emmanuel Quickley believers, but I'm very excited to be on the right side of history of that one for sure. Definitely. I've never been wrong about these things ever. But yeah, I think it's important to get at least 2 guys in, and 3 would be awesome, just to kind of build that shadow core up. So eventually in a year, 2 years time, when the team is maybe making some steps forward, you look around and say, oh, all of a sudden we've got Grady Dick. We've got prospect X from pick 19, prospect X from pick 31, whoever they take next year. All of a sudden, we got ourselves a little bit of a trade package here with some bigger contracts we can go throw together and all of that. I think that is ultimately going to be how they go and get number 2 on this team. Maybe it's just the draft next year, but betting on anything or sort of believing anything good is going to happen from the lottery is a fool's errand and a way to be very, very sad all the time. So you just take that as gravy if it happens. Overall, I think, it's just a good idea to get more young dudes in the building. They've already skewed young with the additions of Quickley and Barrett. And they seem like they have their core guys they want to go forward with here. But if they can go and find, a couple guys who in a year, 2 years time are either contributing to the team in a good way, or are guys who other teams might covet in a trade for a star, then I think that's the way you got to go. And so, I think you might be too young, quote unquote. It maybe leads them to losing a whole bunch of games next year if they're giving 2 guys pick 19 and 31 minutes next season. But I think for the long-term sort of plans, whether it's for tanking next season or for trading for someone down the line, getting 19 and 31 in the door is a good idea. So you don't want to move off of either of those picks or turn 2 into 1. All right, we got to really speed up here. Muggsy asks, will the Raptors draft picks be getting a new uniform on draft night courtesy of a rebrand for the 30th season? Holy God, I hope so. Don't think it'll happen that soon. Feels like quite a quick turnaround, but hell, if that happened, I would be jumping for joy. We can speak it into existence. Next one here, Daryl Knight asks, which obscure prospect could be the next Bruno Caboclo? This is tough because, there's not really obscure prospects anymore. He is from a different age, is Bruno, where there was grainy footage of Brazilian guys that only Masai Ujiri had seen, that Fran Fraschilla was not ready to talk about on draft night. That's kind of an old world when it comes to scouting and draft prep. Everyone has seen everyone. Everyone has scouted everyone. Every corner of the basketball world has been visited by some scout from some team and probably some scout from every team. And so I don't think you're going to find like the element of surprise necessarily, like you did with the Bruno thing. I guess the guy who fits the bill the most with the grainiest footage of what he's done on a court so far is Ulrich Shamshe, the Cameroonian center from the NBA Academy in Africa, who was maybe going to go to college this past year and chose not to. He's in the draft. And I continue to think like if he's there at 31, he's a very, very high likelihood Toronto Raptors ass pick, considering, Masai Ujiri is obviously super plugged in Africa, and Shamshe is a super high upside, very moldable, very raw, very question marky big man who might, if he really, really hits, could be like a very futuristic big man type who the Raptors really could covet. So that's probably the answer, although there's not really a traditional Bruno because that's just not a thing anymore. Next one here comes from Clutch Carter asking, do you think the Raptors should draft a more seemingly ready NBA prospect like De Silva or Devin Carter, or lean more into big swing type prospects like Missy or Dadier? Why not both, baby? You got 2 picks. I'm totally fine if one pick is more of a sort of sure thing. This guy's going to be an adult who plays in the NBA for the next 10 years, who does all the little things, maybe doesn't have super high upside, but you can put them on an NBA floor as early as next season and they're not going to be out of place. Then you follow that up with more of a high upside swing at 31 or vice versa. Got no issues whatsoever if that's the approach here. I think, we know that there's probably going to need to be higher talent upside added to this team at some point. And maybe that's just via a guy you draft who has super high upside now. And in 2-3 years time, you're looking at, okay, like this guy became like a real part of the core. That's very exciting. I think honestly, I'd prefer if they went 1-1, right? One high upside, pie in the sky swing and one more sure thing. It kind of helps them next year, maybe getting a guy who can play rotation minutes right away to add some depth, add some, hopefully some size because they're pretty small still. The Division 6'5", baby, it's back. But yeah, I think going 1-1 on high upside swings and high floor, projectable role player guys, perfectly fine way to approach things. And last question, another one from our pal Freddie Rivas asking, the Raptors have needed a good guard for a long time. Is there someone out there better than Malachi? My friend Freddie, there's always someone out there better than Malachi. Sometimes that someone is Desmond Bane. We're not mad about it at all, are we? No, it's fine. Everything's good. Everything's worked out perfectly since that all went down. Yeah, they can get someone better than Malachi in this draft, I think. I was never like a huge Malachi guy during the draft prep season and all of that. I certainly like guys. I like Tyler Kolek more than him. I like Bub Carrington more than him. There's all sorts of guys who I think if the Raptors were to take a guard at 19 or 31, you could probably bank on them being better than Malachi Flynn was as a Raptor, which is not exactly a high bar to clear. Of course, he saved his best work for his last month in the NBA with the Detroit Pistons with that 50 burger, which baffles the mind. I hope Malachi Flynn finds a job. I don't want to be too mean. It'd be nice to see him stay in the NBA. I don't want to see anyone lose their jobs. Flynn Nation, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, they can probably find someone better than Malachi Flynn. Could have done that back in 2020 as well. Oh, well, we're fine. All right. Leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for sending in questions. We'll be back again tomorrow. Katie Heindel's back after many travels over the last couple of weeks. Looking forward to have Katie back on the show. And then again on Friday, Zulfi Sheikh is going to join us. We're going to do some fake trade fun stuff to round out the week. And man, oh man, 2 weeks away from the draft. It's very exciting stuff. If you want to be in the know of what we're doing on the podcast and being part of our voice chats on draft night and all that, Discord, link in the description. Come join us. We'd love to see you there. You can find me on the Hell website at Woodley Sean doing, like one tweet a week. It's fine. No one needs to see my tweets. I'll just put them in the Discord now. Also, come hang out and follow us on Instagram as well. Posting some videos and stuff there too. YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera. Always appreciate it when you support the show. Love you all. We will talk to you again on Thursday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.